Okay, so good afternoon, everyone who has joined us for our fundraiser webinar, our PropFundrs Community Webinar, as we sometimes call it. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day, I'm sure, to tune in. No doubt some of you are behind your computer screens with notepad and pen, others may be on a train, others may be walking to a meeting, but however you're joining us, absolutely delighted you could join us live. These sessions are, of course, recorded and they go on our YouTube channel. So we tend to not read out people's names who ask questions or make comments, just in case someone doesn't want to be recorded for time immemorial on the wonderful YouTube. So again, thanks everyone who has joined us. The session will last about 50 minutes. But first of all, let me welcome our special guest today. Lorraine Thomas, we'll go with you first. Lorraine, how are you?
I'll just unmute myself. I'm fine. I'm doing grand. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, really looking forward. I think the last time we were together face to face would have been probably down in Brighton.
Yeah.
At a project down there, as I recall. Beautiful summer's day that day, as I remember. It was absolutely gorgeous.
I was in shorts. I can't remember what you were wearing, but yeah, I remember it being really hot. So
It
yeah.
obviously didn't make much of an impression on you if you can't remember what I was wearing, but there we go. There we go. Another day. I'll put a bright polka dot jumper on or something next time, and then you'll definitely remember it.
I remember. Yeah.
But fantastic. And Mr. Saam Lowni, the famous Saam Lowni as he is now with his popular podcast and his Merryoaks business. How are you, Sam?
Very good. Having the best day of my life. Thank you, David, as always.
Excellent, excellent. No, absolutely fantastic. So listen, appreciate both you taking time to come on here. I know you're both exceptionally busy, but you've been willing to jump on and share your knowledge and your insights, which is really, really appreciated. So listen, let's get straight into it so we can come to the main part. I'll get the housekeeping out of the way very, very quickly. So for anyone who's joining for the first time, and I can see there are a number of people who haven't been on this monthly webinar before, the PropFundrs, our mission statement is a good place to start. What gets us out of bed in the morning, what our driver is to empower SME property developers to build more homes by disrupting the alternative funding market. So that's really what I'm about and my team are about. Many of you know me, my background, 24 years involved in the world of property, buy-to-lets, overseas, high-end portfolio building, running agents out in Asia, marketing UK assets. And then for almost 5 years, was an FCA authorized person as we ran an equity property crowdfunding platform called Leo Crowdfunding. And at the end of last year, we pivoted into PropFundrs, which is both equity and debt. And in some ways, we're a broker in some ways, but not a like you would call a lender broker, but more just a facilitator or an introducer. So that's what PropFundrs is about. And why am I sort of focused on this SME developer market? And no doubt, I'm looking forward to Sam and Lorraine's view on this later on as we get into discussion. But there are around about 2,500 SME developers in the UK. If you go back to about 1988, almost 40% of new homes were being built by SME developers. Now, 2024, around about 10%. And I'm certainly passionate and focused on how do we get the SME builders back building more property again. And we all know all the crazy stats of the UK housing market. And we just need to build more houses, affordable housing, social housing, all different types of housing, but there's just a huge gap. So I see kind of my calling in the property industry is to help developers understand alternative funding better, understand debt, understand equity, and help prepare them to receive or to pitch that funding. And we work with experienced developers, we work with younger developers who understand social media, and we work with people who are professionals in the industry who are now pivoting into doing their own developments. So that's really what we're about. But today we're actually going to focus on a panel discussion. And I've obviously just said a quick hello to Lorraine and Sam, but we'll allow them now to take maybe a minute or two each just to give their background and obviously perhaps what excites them about property. and then we're going to really get into this understanding the property fundamentals. So again, I suppose, Lorraine, we'll just go with you first, and you take a couple of minutes and just let everyone know who you are and your background, please.
Okay, so I'm Lorraine Thomas. I'm a developer. I'm a landlord or social a housing provider. We tend to rent to people who are disadvantaged and perhaps don't tick all of the boxes. I used to work in the city in law firms in business development. And I kind of stumbled my way into property and investment. I'll leave it there for now.
Brilliant, fantastic. And Sam, over to you.
So mine is slightly different in that I always knew I wanted to be in property from the age of 10. I wanted to be an estate agent. And in 2001, I moved from the Northeast down to London to study business. I got a job as an estate agent, part-time, working for free, working Fridays, Saturdays, and Mondays, stapling property lists together, getting teas, coffees, lunches, and slowly started doing sales. I ended up studying part-time, working full-time. I absolutely loved it. And the following year, when I'd made a little bit of money, bought my first property, flipped it. It was in Northeast London in Walthamstow. And so over the last 20-something years, I've been an investor, developer, landlord, estate agent. I've also been a founding member of a lending business where we built a development finance lender, building a fund from 0 to 300 million, ticket sizes on average of 10 million, funding SMEs across the UK. Stepped down from that position 2.5 years ago, start my finance brokerage, which helps also SMEs with all of their funding requirements from debt through to equity, helping investors and developers grow their property businesses.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. So if it comes to t-shirts, you've got quite a few t-shirts to use an
I've got
expression.
them. Yeah, exactly. The few that I didn't get were like surveyors or solicitors and stuff, but you need years and years of more training, and I don't have that time on my side anymore.
Yeah. But you've obviously got a good wide variety of experience, which I think is what makes you such a good broker. Because when you're dealing with people who are trying to sort out their capital stack and trying to source funding, you've kind of been on both sides of that equation before and are able to bring that experience to the table.
Yeah, I've used most of the products that we, from buy-to-lets, the bridging, development finance, refurb finance. I've used most of that. I've raised private finance, but I've also been a lender and I've set up a credit department from scratch. So I understand that whole process from start to finish. So it's that's one of the reasons why I moved into that debt advisory role as a broker.
Excellent. And again, I've known both of you for a number of years. Done a bit of business with both of you in terms of Lorraine and investing in some properties through our previous platform. Sam then and bringing you some clients to do your brokering business. So yeah, it's good that I can not just ask your opinion about these topics, but we've actually professionally been engaged before. So I know the quality of your work and the professionalism that you both bring to this industry. So look, let's dive straight into this. And I sort of started off by a bit of a play on words in some respects. Property fundamentals are fundamental to property, and it doesn't get any more simple than that, even though it's quite a complex subject when you deep dive into it. So we're going to start off looking at the developer side, and then we've got a couple of thought-provoking investor fundamentals. And again, as always, we always enjoy when people in the audience either make comments or by all means ask a question or make a point. Again, we're always very, very keen to do that. So put that into the Q&A rather than the chat box, please, into the Q&A, and we'll be able to have a look at it and either answer at the end, or if it's relevant what we're talking about at the time, then of course we'll answer straight away. So this whole concept of what are the fundamentals? Someone wants to be a property developer. Fundamentals, I've put 5 up just by way of leading the discussion. So I suppose number 1 is fundamentally, if you're in the developer business, you've got to go and find either land or a property that you're going to add some value to. So Sam, do you want to kick off on that one first in terms of acquisition? I suppose being a lender, that's when people come to you. So how how important is that process, or what is the best way of a developer starting that process to decide what to buy?
Really good question. And I think that from an acquisition point of view, what you're going to do, it depends on a couple of things. Firstly, are you going to be doing something that's buy and hold or buy and sell? I think that that's one of the factors that you need to straight away think about. Geographical location as well. So if you're based in London, for example, and you're looking at high yielding income producing assets that you want to hold for a long term, doing that in London is incredibly difficult to get a reasonably decent yield. So you might have to go up into the northeast or the northwest or the valleys in Wales or something like that. So then the geographical location becomes important to consider as well. And also how far your capital will stretch as well. So you normally have a starting pool, whether it be yours or you're working with investors, but no bucket of capital is infinite. So how much capital are we starting with? How far can that stretch us? And again, that will just dictate to you where in the country that you're going to be looking for sites. Then also another consideration as well as on the acquisition side is what type of asset class are you going for? So in planning, you've got all the different use classes from A, B, E, C, D, etc. Are you going to be doing mainly the residential stuff? So that's C1, C2, C3, hotels, that sort of thing, which has a commercial element to it. Or is it going to be HMOs and those sorts of things? Or are you going to be doing purely industrial use or commercial use? So when you write all of these things down, then you can work out, I think, where you're going to start the search. There's a lot to take on board, but those are the kind of things that I'd start with.
Brilliant. Okay, Lorraine, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think the first thing is, particularly for developers, is location. Where exactly are you buying and what are you buying? So if it's, for instance, a whole load of garages that you're going to buy and knock them down, what you're looking at the end value. So what can you get out of that particular plot that you're looking at? What's the end value and what's it going to cost you? And then all the due diligence beforehand. So there's a whole host of things that I remember when we bought our first plot, we didn't understand any of it, all the fundamental things like what's the ground like, getting a ground survey, getting planners involved, having really getting the council on your side. All of these things come into play before you actually acquire. And if you don't tick all the boxes and get them right, they'll come to haunt you further down the line. So it's really important to have a checklist, have people who know that can guide, that have been there before, that can guide you, because it's so important.
Brilliant. Okay, so if both of you have just a wee glance at the rest of them, I'm going to come off the slides actually, so that obviously as you speak, your full screen, because I know sometimes it can be frustrating as an attendee, sort of seeing a wee box in the corner. So obviously with acquisition, feasibility, authorities, revenue, delivery, and we'll go through these sort of one by one. Now, interestingly, I need to make sure I get the right button. So interestingly, in terms of what you both said there was location, sort of the capital being finite, type of asset. Is it fair to say that strategy is probably a good summary to what we've talked about there? And I always say to people, when they say to me, most important thing in property, location, I sometimes say, actually, no. What's actually the most important starting point in property is strategy. Because you might have the most phenomenal property in the most amazing location, but if it's not part of your strategy, then what relevance is it? So I sometimes think strategy, and everything you've both commented on there, absolutely fits into that. You've got to get those things clear in your mind first. And interestingly, Lorraine, you then kind of moved in almost to point 2, which was feasibility. The ground, the surveys, etc. So moving on to that, if you want to go first, then we've kind of set the strategy. The type of property or land that the developer's looking for. How do you go about then seeing, so someone brings, or let's say you're looking at 5 options. how would you begin to go through the feasibility of those options in terms of some of the things you've already mentioned there? What would be your process for that?
So, well, cost comes into it. You've got a budget, so you've got to start somewhere. So it might as well be with what can you afford. And then I think it's in terms of strategy, are you keeping them, or is it that you're just going to sell them? What are you going to sell them for? Is it better to have 1 bed as opposed to 2 beds or 3 beds that might not sell as well? So it's looking at you know, where am I going to make the biggest profit in terms of what I'm actually producing? And it's interesting that sometimes particularly councils like to have mixed use, and they say, right, okay, it's likely to go through if you've got some affordable housing included, maybe, or you've got a 3 bed so that it caters for families, and then you've got the 1 beds for the first time buyers. But sometimes the actual site it's not going to stack up for you, and by the time you've done the numbers, it's all about the numbers. If the numbers don't add up, then you've got to look at, well, actually, could I get it through planning and then just sell it without developing it? Because that's another option. And sometimes it's probably it can be the most profitable way of just getting the planning permission and then saying, oh, okay, right, if we build this out, it may take away a lot of our margin, so we'll just sell it with the planning in place.
Okay, no, that sounds good. And that all feeds into the feasibility study, and maybe having options of different exits or disposal of the asset is always good. Brilliant. Okay, Sam, in terms of, I suppose you're coming at this sometimes from a lending point of view, and you're someone may have a great strategy and find what they think is a good property, but maybe you're thinking, well, is this going to satisfy a lender? So feasibility study wise, what should a developer be thinking about if they want to come and get some senior debt on the purchase?
Yeah. So it's interesting, actually, because going back to your point on the strategy as well, one of the things I didn't mention was whether you wanted to take things through planning or whether you wanted to just acquire sites with planning approval already in place. And that will also dictate to you what you will and won't look at. So there is a way of filtering through size, location, of asset type for a developer of what sort of thing that they want to be doing. And then the feasibility is very much where there's a specific type of developer that this term was brought to me by Jack Jiggins, I think, or Ben Richards, one of the two. Anyway, they're spreadsheet developers. So everything that they do feasibility wise is just on a spreadsheet, and they'll look at numbers, they'll look at reports, and they'll just determine whether they can move forwards or not. They're not physically getting their hands dirty and getting on the site or anything and building stuff out and digging trenches and this, that, and the other in the cold. They're literally just doing feasibility studies, and that has a number of checkpoints right through along the way. The first point, the most important point, in my opinion, is having a really good spreadsheet to be able a model effectively to be able to punch all your numbers in, and that will give you an idea of whether the project is at all in any way, shape, or form going to be profitable by the end of it. And you can do that pre-planning or you can do it post-planning. You have to start with the end in mind. So you start with the scheme that you've got that you think that you're going to get planning on, or that you've already got an approved scheme. You put that unit stack in there. So it's got all of your unit types. It's got your square footage of each unit broken down. It's got your GDV. It'll tell you your GDV per square foot. It'll tell you the rental income of that unit as well, because if your plan is to hang on to them, you'll need to know what sort of yield it can command to make sure it meets your interest coverage ratios, or if it's your plan B, that's your fallback position. And then you put in how many months it's going to take you to build, and then how many months it's going to take you to exit. And then you can have your sales costs in there, your exit costs, which would be solicitors fees, estate agency fees, any marketing, CGI costs. Then you've got your acquisition costs, your stamp duty, your if you're paying an agent a sourcing fee, sometimes acquisition fees can be applicable, your solicitors fees to acquire it. Then you've got your construction costs. So this is just your materials and labor. Then you've got your contingency on top. Then you've got your professional fees, all of your insurance, warranties, and everything. And then you've got your sales and S106, depending on the size of the scheme. Once you've got all of those numbers in place, then you can calculate your before finance profit on cost and GDV. Then you put some finance cost in it. And if you reach the right number at the end on paper, you can see whether the deal is at all ever going to be feasible. Once you've got that, and that's the best place to start, in my opinion, then you can start to look at, okay, which professionals do I need to bring in to verify these numbers? So do I need an estate agent to do it for free to get the GDV, or do I need to get a risk valuer who's going to put some PI insurance on the line and to get the end value and the residual land value? Do I need to get a quantity surveyor to marry up the build costs and make sure that they're happy with those? Is that elected by me or the lender? If it's pre-planning, then we need ecology reports, you need planning consultants, you need transport reports, and a whole, there's loads and loads of reports. So there's lots and lots that needs to go into it. But if you wanted to absolutely start from one point just to see whether the thing is going to be viable or not based on what you've got in your mind, with or without planning, that initial spreadsheet, in my opinion, is the best place to start.
And that makes good sense. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Just to add to that, I mean, all of that, but it's about the risk, isn't it? So, and especially, so it's risk and the time it's going to take to if you go ahead with building it out. And, you know, if it's 12 months, add another 6 months, because things go wrong and nothing ever goes. And that time, that extra time is money.
Yes.
And that cost is something that we actually don't think about, or it gets lost somewhere, that if it takes an extra 3 or 4 months or an extra year, all of that is going to add up.
Yeah. No, that's again some really good points there. And as you went through, Sam, going through all the different aspects of feasibility and seeing whether or not it works, it probably in some ways can put some people off, because they're thinking, well, I don't know a surveyor. I don't know, someone to go and do the reports. Who do I go to? How do I know I can trust them? How hard is it to create that power team of people that you can kind of bring in and have a bit of trust, or is that just me speaking more from experience about trust? Is if you went out and you allocate people professionally, are most people going to do a good enough job that they're getting paid for? Okay, let me rephrase that. Should the fact that you have to go out and create new relationships with those professionals, should that hinder a new developer?
Never. No, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to step outside our front door to be able to go and do business with somebody or other to make any money, right? Whether it be landowners, whether it be agents, and we need to go and build those relationships. And I always tell people, we're not in the we're not in the real estate business, we're in the relationship business. And we have to be comfortable going out building those relationships. And the stronger ones are developed over time, and the more momentum that you've got. Now, just to go quickly back to Lorraine's point as well, I do agree that once you've got these spreadsheets in place, it's fantastic, but you have to stress test everything up and down. So your sales period elongate, your GDV goes down or up, your build costs can go up, and nothing ever seems to go to plan. The more you do it, the more you'll realize that. Going back to the point of the relationships, though, I think that this is built. There is an element of trust. And there's the ways of mitigating some risk in shoddy relationships or bad workmanship. Sometimes these professionals do have PI insurance on the line that can give you some sort of recourse. Obviously, you don't want to go down that route. But I think from my point of view, recommendations, surrounding yourselves. I mean, being in communities like this is fantastic. So recommendations. I need a quantity surveyor in my local area who can firm up some build costs for a development just down the road. And then he said, I've just done another one with another developer, and he can verify that, or valuers that we've just been talking about mostly. But I think anything from planning consultants, architects, all of these people can and will let you down at some point in time. But if you are, through the 6 degrees of separation, find good people to work with, you can minimize that risk. You can't mitigate it entirely, because for all the best will in the world as well, and this is just life, you get recommended to somebody, but they're going through a hard time at this particular moment. They might be going through a divorce, or the business is falling apart because of, so they are very good professionally, or they just got really busy because they are so good, and they just kind of drop the ball and they let you down. So things can happen along the way, and but then business is not about eliminating risks, it's about minimizing them, because there's always going to be some sort of risk for a return. It's just about how you can kind of navigate through it all.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think,
No, that's
yeah,
absolutely brilliant. Go ahead.
just on that point of minimizing risk, as a mentor, I would say this, but it's really important to talk to people who have been through it, talk to people who know, because we're talking about fundamentals, right? So if you're new to development and you've never done a development before, how do you know who to have on your team? How do you know who should be on your team? So an example of this is we had a monitoring surveyor, but what we did was we also chose an architect who was our CA, our contract administrator. That can cause a little bit of conflict. But if you don't know, how do you know that you don't know? And how do you know you need a contract administrator who's actually going to make sure that everything's been done correctly? So that's why it's important to surround yourself with people who know, that can say, have you thought about this person? Have you thought about, have you got someone in your team that's looking out for you as well as looking out for the project? So it's really important to make sure that you talk to people who have been through it before.
That's a really good point on conflict. Actually, I hadn't really thought of that, the way you framed that, and it's actually a really good word, because that is exactly what happens very often. Is there is some conflict between various parties that you need to work together to deliver the project, which is very interesting. Is probably that actually would make for a very good topic for another webinar, is the conflict that develops, and sometimes it's healthy conflict, sometimes it's professional people keeping other professional people on their toes per se, but that's actually very interesting, and funnily enough kind of leads into the next thing, which is sort of authorizations required. Before I do that, just mentioning the first name also, because we are recording. I see Mark's commented here, let's have this spreadsheet, I'm sick of being on site, which I can I think I can empathize, and probably a lot of developers feel exactly the same way sometimes. But yeah, there are a variety of spreadsheets. So Mark, you'll get details at the end. Reach out, and I can certainly send you a couple. Sam did mention Ben Richards and Jack Jiggins. Probably Jack is about the king of spreadsheets, I think, when it comes to anyone I've met before. I remember being at a meal with him one day, and yeah, I got him to show me his spreadsheet system, and it was eye-watering, but very, very effective for him, and allows him to keep track of everything. So yeah, by all means, reach out at the end, Mark, and we'll get to that. Right. So moving on here. So authorization. Now we're into where probably conflict does come, planning, which is an absolute disaster at the minute. Talk about a broken system, but even just things like regulations around HMO. Obviously, we had a budget there recently, where again some of the holiday let legislation changed, etc. So I suppose just speak to that. We've probably got about 6-7 more minutes to finish off sort of the developer side before flipping to the investor side. But yeah, what everyone wants to comment first. Fundamentals, how important is it to be aware of the various authorizations that you may need? I suppose even health and safety comes into that. So I'll let either of you comment on that.
Okay, well, I'm happy to talk about planning, just a brief comment on planning. I was speaking to a planning officer yesterday. He came out to see one of our developments that we're doing, and we're trying to divide it into flats, etc. And he mentioned that he understands, because Croydon is the area that I operate in, and Croydon is probably one of the worst for planning and getting anything done in under a year. And we were having this conversation around, well, why does it take so long? And he said, actually, the council are now looking at what they're calling clearing. So they're having weeks where they're not actually going to take any phone calls, so that they can just focus on all of the applications and get through them. He said they've whittled down like 1,000 applications down to like 100, because they have these clearing weeks now where they don't actually tackle the external world. You know, they don't answer the phone and emails and all of that. They just get straight into it. And I think that's really, I just wanted to say it because I'm always knocking planning and saying how broken it is, and but they're actually, that's quite positive. And it was really refreshing to hear that they recognize that, especially for smaller developers, that the time is money, and the longer they take, you know, and often they take really long time, and you might not even get the planning. So you've got to go through the appeal process and then come back and fix it and then go again. So that was a really positive thing, that, you know, they're focusing on building their teams and getting the applications through. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, that's a fair one. To be fair, they tend to be bashed quite a lot, the planners. Our last monthly webinar was on planning, with a couple of sort of planning professionals on. So there's some interesting insights into the frustrations that are existing currently. But credit where credit's due, Lorraine. You've indicated that they've looked at it and they're actually not just doing the same thing all the time. They're actually saying, okay, can we make a change? And in some ways, that's all you can ask, is that they try some new solutions to what is, I think, a painful problem. So Sam, then, in terms of, you know, what other aspects in terms of fundamentals when it comes to, I'm going to be a developer, I've sort of got my strategy, I've looked at a few sites, feasibility study. Fundamentally, what should I be thinking about in terms of authorities? What they need to be aware of?
Yeah, so it's kind of like authorities. Permissions is a word that I use. It's like, who's giving you the permission to do this? Or so the most obvious one is the planning approval. Without that, you shouldn't be doing anything, digging a spade in the ground. Even with permitted development, you have to be careful of prior approval, because you actually have to get the approval first, or put in your application and then start work. If for any reason you get on site and you start doing the work thinking that you've got the right to do it, they can actually remove that right. And then and I've seen some horror stories of that, where a simple loft conversion for a nice, beautiful HMO in a non-Article 4 area just gets ripped apart and goes through 2 years of litigation. So permission is super important. Then you've got things like warranties. So you need your warranty provider, especially if you're doing new build, to be able to provide, let's say, a 10-year NHCB. Can't remember the acronym. NHCB, I think it was, warranty. So that's super important as well. And they've got loads of nuances. It's effectively an insurance policy that says for the next 10 years, this building, this structure is gonna somebody's gonna give some sort of assurance that it's not going to fall down, or any serious structural issue is not going to be affecting any of the residents residing in the building. And I literally just come across one right now where they paid £35,000 up front for a warranty for 10 years. And they also want PGs off the developer. So you've actually got to personally guarantee, because and they're a little bit of a con, these things, in my opinion, because they charge you the premium and then they come after you if anything goes wrong. So there's another policy that was recently put in place, it was quoted, but the developer never went for it. They wanted to put £100,000 on account, so that if anything happened, they would be able to use that money to remedy it. So ultimately, they're taking your money and then they're using your own money to remedy it. So it's like, what's the point of you being here? Anyway, so all of that sort of stuff exists. But it's super, super important, and you've got to get it done at the beginning of the project. Don't do it halfway through, because nobody wants to insure something that they have had no monitoring over it, so they know how the foundations have been built, or how the kind of the guts of the building have been put together in the first place. Then you've got building control as well. So building control is separate and super duper important. Without building control sign off, you will not get funding. You will not get funding without a warranty in place, and you will not get funding without planning approval. You will not reach what they call practical completion until you have at least these three things. Then there are some times as well, when it comes to planning, there's post-planning conditions as well that need to be put in place. Things like sills and S106s. So I've got another one where it should be a development exit, should have been gone through last month, nice and easy, but it came out that the S106 that was issued last August had a £95,000 payment that nobody paid. So then that needed to be done and ratified again. So yeah, S106s and sills, that's part of the planning, but those things need to be checked off. Those are the main ones I think that come to my mind for permission.
Yep. No, I think you've covered, I think, but between you both, you've covered all the main ones there. Obviously, the next level would just be things like if someone wanted to get involved in HMOs, then there's certain aspects to the construction, to, you know, the fire safety, you know, size of rooms. There's you know,
You've got gas safe certificates, you've got
needed for
electrical
that.
safe certificates, which all kind of comes in within building control.
Yeah.
Can I just
No.
add very quickly, because I know we're short of time, we've got lots to cover, but just on the point Sam made about warranties, it's really, really important who actually takes out the warranty. So is it the contractor or is it the developer? And
Yes.
is it fit for purpose? So because we have been stung where the contractor took out the warranty when there was a problem, and we went to then we went to the warranty company and said, look, there's a problem here. The actual warranty isn't worth the paper it's written on, because half of the things that you expect would be covered are not. So it's absolutely crucial to have things like balconies looked at, all the things that that are likely to leak, have those covered under the warranty, because you often find that most of these warranties don't cover things like that. And so it's really important. And again, it goes back to, if you don't know, how do you know that you don't know? So you need somebody to really check that the warranties that you are getting will cover your site if there is a problem. And the other thing is Section 106 is that can be covered under the development finance. So it should be part of that
Yes.
that funding that you get. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Funny. I made a note to self there to actually use that as an example of someone doing their figures and not actually realizing that there was going to be a big bill, perhaps on Section 106. But you know, absolutely brilliant. I'm smiling to myself there because I know the marketing team are always looking for a wee 30-second, 1.5 minute shorts for social media. So I think what you just said there, Lorraine, is going to be a very, very good punchy sort of slap in the face to developers to get your warranty sorted. No excuse. Make sure your belt and braces on them, because again, fundamentally, what we're talking about today, if you get that wrong, it can be so detrimental, to your project, and take you from profitability to loss of funds due to just a simple mistake at not understanding the important fundamental of having all your authorizations in place. So fantastic. Okay, so we've got revenue and delivery. I think revenue is obviously an important one. You know, given obviously that the capital stack tends to be one of the major problems for developers. Certainly in my experience, you both can give your own experience in that. But if I just maybe sort of introduce this section regarding the capital stack, I think is a good way of introducing it, because you've got to be looking at the funding of the project, but then also the monitoring, and then been really clear on what the potential profit is. And I sometimes liken the capital stack to a house where the ground floor is the senior debt. It's going to have first charge. Normally the return is going to be single digit, but that's very much the ground floor. First floor may well be a bit of mezzanine, sort of second charge. The cost of that money is maybe 10, 11% up to 16, 17% potentially. There's going to be a second charge, may still be a PG, debenture over the company, whatever the case may be. And then I liken the roof to the equity, which might be some individual equity from the principal, or if they want to go and find a private investor or investors, providing they do it in a compliant way, into the SPV. So that's what I call the funding. So Sam, you're probably best to talk about let's say you talk about the ground floor and first floor in terms of debt, and then Lorraine, I'll let you cover equity in terms of what are the fundamentals around that are essential. So Sam, over to you first.
Sure. So you've got this first floor and second floor, as you call it, senior debt, which is the first charge, and then the second charge, which is the mezz, the second floor, as you call it. So there are a lot of lenders out there these days. Since 2008, the market is incredibly fragmented, whereas before 2008, you'd probably go to your high street banks or your building societies, and you'll be able to get a 60% LTGDV loan and happy days. Whereas now there's a lot of private lenders, private equity backed, private debt, high net worths that will do that funding for you. And typically for development finance, what you would find is a developer that will provide you with senior debt, first charge debt, and they'll split that facility into 3 parts. So they would lend you up to a maximum of typically anywhere between 60 to stretch senior 75% loan to gross development values, LTGDV. And then they'll cap out as well at an LTC, a loan to cost, of anywhere between 75 to 90%. And of those funds that they lend you, they will be split into 3 tranches. There'll be the finance facility, which is the interest and arrangement fee rolled up for the course of the loan, whether it be 12, 18, 24 months typically. And then you'll have 100% of construction costs. So they'll always prioritize 100% of construction costs, all construction fees typically. So that'll be your S106s, your sales, your professional fees, contingency. And then whatever's left over, up to 70% of the purchase price or value of the asset that you're developing, whether it be a piece of land or a building. That's typically how the senior debt works. The junior debt will sit on top of the senior debt. So senior debt typically, let's call it senior debt, not stretch senior, that will go up to 60, 65% LTGDV. So if you wanted to go up another 10% of GDV, you would get a second charge mezzanine loan. And as you say, they will charge you a little bit more. So right now with Bank of England base rate at 5%, we're seeing rates at around 18 to 22%. And then with a 3 to 5% arrangement fee on top, and sometimes a 2% exit fee. The highest I've seen mezzanine right now is about 30% all in, which is nuts.
Wow.
But
yeah, that's savage in terms of your
they're going up to
fees.
about 95% of cost, so they're going almost into that equity piece as well. But they're keeping you on the hook, and there's a big difference between debt and equity, which Lorraine can kind of go into a bit more. But the most significant part of debt is that you are on the hook for that money, come rain or shine. You have to pay that money back. So it's expensive. It's usually a small tranche, so you shouldn't be taking on a whole stack of that expensive debt. Typically for your senior debt, you should be looking at around 10% per annum, 2% arrangement fee, 1% exit fee. Of course, it can be a little bit more expensive depending on your track record, depending on the strength of your balance sheet and the profitability of the project.
Brilliant. Okay, that's some good clear points there. So Lorraine, equity wise, then run the roof. Whenever, how do you we describe equity, and then how would you access that, or if someone came to you for a solution, what would you advise them?
I think the first point that I would make here is that the reason that development is almost at the top of the property pyramid, if you like, is because it is so difficult and so complicated. And it's not like just going to auction and you can get some bridging finance to quickly help you to buy it. Development funding is extremely savage. And the problem is often lenders will want unencumbered property to be sort of stacked behind it. And if you are new to development, or you don't have anything that's unencumbered, it's quite difficult to get the finance to get you going. So that's the first thing I'd say. The second thing is that actually be careful who you go with. Is your lender actually going to see you all the way through? We have been in a position where we've got to about sort of 18 months during COVID, and then this thing was like clearly going to extend, and the lenders started to get a little bit worried, a little bit nervous, so and wanted to pull out. So if your lender gets nervous, then that means that you've got to start the process again. So you've got to pay even more fees to kind of put that to bed. And then you've got to now pay new broker fees, find more lending and an extended time. And it's all costs, it's all eating into the numbers. So I think that the message is go with a lender that's going to support you if things go wrong or are extended. Will they, have they got an option, plan B? Make sure there's a plan A and a serious plan B, because often with development, it's drawn out and it can end up costing you far more than you'd got on any balance, any sheet.
Which is very important, as you say, when it comes to the whole sort of revenue considerations in terms of the fundamentals. So again, some really good points made there. I mean, you could do a whole webinar just on revenues, tracking them, cash flow, what happens when things go wrong and all of that. The equity side of the piece is, of course, full capital at risk, returns not guaranteed, which, as Sam's alluded to, the debt is, you're on the hook for the debt no matter what. So there are every pros and cons. I'm going to throw one thing out, but we don't have time to delve into it because I want to finish this off and with just 2 or 3 points to make on the equity side. But I've certainly been involved over the last number of years in discussions around second charge lending. And it is quite interesting because there are people obviously who have a full business around that and no issues at all. However, if a project goes wrong and goes south, by the time the first charge lender has taken whatever they need out of the project, and the chances are it's in trouble, either because the cost of money's gone up or the value of the asset's gone down because of the economic situation, the chances of there being a whole lot left after the first charge lender has finished are actually quite slim. So I know some people argue, and I tend to agree with them, that second charge lending sometimes can literally be a figment of people's imagination in the sense that they have the illusion of security, but the reality is if a project really hits the fan, there ain't a whole pile left of the asset by the time the first charge lender takes what he wants. Now, I know that's a controversial statement. No doubt people will go, no, blah, blah, blah. But that's just throwing it out there. Be clear, particularly for private second charge lenders. I appreciate the institutions maybe have a different analysis before they would lend, but I know a lot of people who go to private lenders for the gap between the first charge lending and the equity, and if the people doing the loans don't really understand it, they can find themselves thinking they've got security. In reality, they really don't. To
that point, I totally agree with you. What's really important is the LTV. I would potentially take a third charge position with somebody if I knew that their overall asset was levered at 30%. So it's like it's so low leverage that £1 million asset, it's only £300,000 worth of loan against it. Something has to go drastically wrong before I lose. But I think a lot of people don't understand how all of that works within a stack.
Yeah. Okay. Very good questions come in here. From Ian. How can you stop the lender pulling out? What do you specifically do to minimize that risk? What are the tips and tricks to avoid this? So that's actually a good point. I'll let either of you speak to that.
The question was how do we stop vendors pulling out?
No, sorry, the lender. So Lorraine mentioned how the lender got a bit of cold feet and wanted then to maybe exit the deal. And that's happened to so many people that all 3 of us know. The lender just decided, you know what, had enough, we're out. So is there any way that a developer can either prevent that or at least try and minimize that risk? Any sort of tips or tricks to avoid this?
So there's three points at which this can happen. This can come pre-funding, where you've gone down the road and you've got your surveys in place, valuations and all sorts, and then they'd say, actually we don't want to fund this. And that happens more often than we care to admit. It can happen mid-project as well, and I've been in that situation. And it can happen at the end whereby you just need a small extension or something. And they're just like, no, we've had enough and we just want out. And we just, you got to refinance us now, even though the 3 to 6 months that you need that would probably help get their money back in a timely fashion. They're just at the end of their business plan and they're just being obtuse about it and they just want their money back. So how can you avoid these 3 stages? Well, there's 3 different things, right? So at the beginning, you just need to be absolutely rock solid on your gross development value, on your build costs, on your balance sheet, and how you present the deal. The presentation is absolutely everything, making sure you've got absolutely everything that they're going to want to see. Because I've done this so many times as a lender and as a borrower, I'm pretty good at it now, understanding how a credit committee reviews the deal, what sort of questions they're going to be asking, what sort of detail they're going to be looking for, so we can mitigate a lot of that upfront. But it just takes time. There's a lot that goes into it. I think I've got an underwriting checklist that we made as a lender, and there was something like 50 different points that we'd need to box off. So there is a lot that needs to go into it. Mid-construction, the one that the lender decided we're not doing any more drawdowns for construction. We're going to let you go to the end of the term. So you've got another 3 months left, but we just don't believe you're going to get to the finish line, and we're not going to give you another 6 months extension. So we just want our money back. That was because the borrower had failed to get planning on one part of the scheme, which was a larger part. No, sorry, it wasn't planning. It was a party wall award that was so that he could build on that part of the development. He also built something that he wasn't in line with his planning approval, which was flagged. So he breached his planning. His contractor had walked out on him halfway through as well. So he had a little bit of a delay. So he was behind time, a few different breaches. And they just said 1 yellow flag, 2 yellow. It's like in football, right? You get a couple of yellow cards, and then it's like, okay, we're just at the end now. So the moral of that story is try not to make too many mistakes through the course of the project where they're going to feel like you either don't know what you're doing or this is just heading for a car crash and we want out before it gets too heavy. And at the end, it's all, in my opinion, it's about the relationship that you've got with the lender throughout. If they see that they want to do more business with you because you've been so good, you've been well communicative throughout, you've hit your milestones, typically they will push mountains to be able to try and appease you and stay with you in general. However, you don't know what's going on behind the curtain, what their funding lines are saying, what their business plan's saying. So just my final point on this is that one bridge lender in particular that I know that really messed up on a loan and lost a bit of money. So they went throughout their whole loan book looking for other borrowers that they could put into default to try and make that money back. And if you just get caught in amongst that, you no matter how much you sweet talk them, no matter how good you've been, if you put a foot wrong, they will charge you for it, and there's nothing you can do. You just a bit of bad luck.
So I think
go ahead, yes, Lorraine, let you have the last word on that.
Yeah, very quickly. I think what I would say is so I agree with Sam, although you can have the best relationship going with your lender, and if they are being pulled behind the scenes, then they've got to pull the rug from under you. So and I have been in this position where we had the best relationship, but it doesn't matter if they can see things going south. So the key to it all is the relationship that you have with your contractors, because the lender needs to see that you and your contractors are working together really well. They've got confidence in the contractor. They've got confidence that the contractor is going to pick up speed if things have gone a bit south. And the contractor is the absolute key to the lender saying, oh, you know what? The developer's working really well with the contractor. The contractor's on their side and they're going to push this through.
Okay, no, that's absolutely brilliant. What you've covered there really is about delivery. So we've really covered that last point, which is really good. Relationships, contractor being key. Yeah, some really good points. Listen, I think that was phenomenal. I think that was a really, really good session around the developer side. So to finish off, in just sort of 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to do a quick fire round. So you're only allowed 1 sentence. Okay, it's going to test your ability to be brief. So like 1 sentence, and these are some fundamentals on the investor side. So the slide will have the fundamental, and then just literally in one sentence sort of speak to it, affirm it, disagree with it, whatever you want to do, but you've only got one sentence. Okay. So number one, fundamental, invest in yield, not just capital appreciation. So again, kind of think a little bit from investor side. So any one sentence comments on that?
Yeah, if the numbers
Go on.
if the numbers don't stack up, the numbers don't stack up. So, you know, further down the line, long term, that's great, but it has to be working for you. Cash flow is king. So it has to be working for you now. So yeah, that's one.
Brilliant. Okay, good. Sam?
Yeah, totally agree. Most of my portfolio since 2015 has all been high yielding, income producing assets. And then the capital growth is the cherry on top over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Number two, do your own DD. And this definitely is developers and investors. So how important is it to do your own DD as a developer or as a investor?
It's everything. It's actually one of the points that came to my mind earlier is that the professionals that you instruct is exactly that. You instruct. You don't ask them, can I do this? Can I do that? You instruct them to do this and that. So you need to know what you're doing to be able to command and instruct. It's like you're the conductor of the orchestra. You need to be able to get the tempo. You need to be able to say who's doing what. If you don't do your own DD, you can't do that effectively. And that's where I think most people find their pitfalls.
Brilliant. Okay. Lorraine?
I'd say measure it twice, cut it once.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's definitely a social media short there. 100%. Thank you. Okay. Number three, I think there's 6 of these in total or 5. Invest in what you know. Avoid areas outside your knowledge or expand your education, but invest in what you know.
Oh my goodness. So for me, I always say to mentees, if you're going to invest with me and do a hand-holding thing, it has to be where we can get to, because that's how you're going to learn on site and in the thick of it. I've never, this is going to sound really controversial, but I've never really understood the learning aspect if it's like miles away and it's going to take you 2 days to get to it. And also you lose half of your profit if you're doing a project that's up north, say, and you don't know anybody up north. You've got to pay somebody to manage that project for you. So stick to where you know. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Sam?
Yeah, Warren Buffett, who's a better investor than I am, said that the biggest risk is not knowing what you're doing. So it's pretty much, again, it's everything, doing your DD and then investing exactly in what you know. And I just couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Number 4, leave the emotion out of it. So how important is it to take your emotion out of property projects and investing?
Well, actually, I did an interesting talk with Mike Bristow, Crowd Property, about the emotion versus the analytical side and the mathematics side of it. And although I started with the deal appraisal and the numbers have to stack up, and that is super, super duper important, it's the marrying of all these relationships as well, because I say to everyone that we're in the relationship business. So there's an element of emotion and there's an element of because the passion comes through, that when things go wrong, the will, to not give up. I think all of that is super important, and that's where emotion needs to come into it. And there's a marrying of it, but of course, you don't want to lead with emotion. That's definitely not the right way to do it.
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Okay.
I would say if you're buying at auction, you've got to leave your ego at the door. I mean, it can run away with you. I must get this because I must be X, and actually overpay on things that are not actually worth it. So from an auction perspective, it's got to be, what is my ceiling price? Where am I going to stop?
Yeah. Okay. These sentences are getting longer and longer, guys. So such things as this is the last one actually. No such thing as get rich quick in property. comment?
Get rich slow, there is.
Good answer. Lorraine?
No chances to get rich quick. Agreed.
Yeah.
I think it's not get rich quick, but it's get rich for sure. I think slow and steady wins the race. It's not tech. It doesn't travel at the speed of light. It's one brick at a time, one planning application at a time. Things just take time. If you've got the patience, if you've got the passion, I think you can do very well out of it. And I think it's a really, really good asset class for generational wealth. But it's certainly, I wouldn't put it in the get rich quick bucket at all now. Not personally, anyway.
Definitely, it's that there's a legacy around longer term wealth and holding. I would always promote holding over not, but sometimes there comes a time when you have to let things go because you want to do bigger and better projects, maybe, or simply for cash flow. But you know, I would always say hold on to as much as you possibly can. But there are times that you know you
Yeah,
can't.
you just can't. Okay, absolutely fantastic. I think there was so much content in sort of 55 minutes there, which was absolutely superb. There are literally just about 2 slides to finish off here. For those that aren't aware of PropFundrs, you can go to our website, propfunders.com. You'll see exactly what we do in helping developers who are starting the journey, developers who are dealing with a lot of the issues and challenges that we've heard Lorraine and Sam talk about. We can assist with that. We like to be involved in education, which this webinar is. It's a free webinar. It's about bringing education to SME developers and letting them see some of the challenges and hearing the solutions that we've heard today. We do have some services that we actually can help developers prepare themselves for lending, deal with some of the challenges that they experience, and then we are able to introduce some of our clients to lending sources. So for instance, Sam and his broker business as a senior debt provider with Merryoaks, we've actually, just recently brought him a client who needed some senior debt, and he was able to take over the relationship. We simply did the introduction, but Sam and his team then helped prepare that project to go to a lender. So again, that's something that we can do on the debt and the equity side. For those of you that haven't seen our property funding podcast, there's a number of episodes there which are very interesting. It's like an hour and 20 minutes sort of deep dive into an individual who has some success in the world of property, but it strays out a bit beyond that into success in life in general, delivery of projects, passion, all the things that go into the mix. Because at the end of the day, property developers are still human beings. They've chosen property as their profession, but fundamentally, obviously, we're all human beings. So it delves into that and tries to understand what makes people tick. So we've got some great ones on there you can go on and see. Next webinar. So 15th of May is the next one. Absolutely delighted that Julianne White is going to be our guest. So I've been trying to line Julianne up for a month or two now. Julianne's from Northern Ireland, but does business actually in different parts of Europe. She comes from a sort of property background professionally, and then has pivoted into her own business, Method Property Solutions. I don't think I know too many people that do as much as Julianne does. She has multiple sort of property businesses. She spins a remarkable number of plates, always has a smile on her face, which is a great achievement for someone who's so busy, and has a family. So we're gonna hear a little bit from Julianne, particularly around this idea of work-life balance while running multiple property businesses. So I think this will be very valuable, particularly for developers who perhaps have multiple projects on the go or have a main job and trying to do property on the side. But this whole idea of work-life balance is so important, I think, in the modern world, particularly with family, and making sure that you create time, to be with a family, young kids growing up, spouses, etc. So I think it's going to be a really, really good discussion around that. But Julianne's got so much to share, so many ideas, particularly around her ability to get so much done in her processes and her systems. Her efficiency levels are very, very impressive. So tune in next month then, 15th of May. If you want to reach out to me, See it on the left, David at propfunders.com. Mobile numbers there. You can do a quick screen grab. And there is our YouTube channel, and the recording will be up probably in about an hour's time. So let me come off the share and give you both a final 1-sentence goodbye. From me, really, really appreciate it's been on. I think it's been a really interesting session. So let's say we'll go with Saam first and then finish off then with Lorraine. So Saam, I'll let you kind of, any last thoughts, or how did you enjoy that?
Yeah, I loved it. Thank you so much for inviting me. I always enjoy sharing my thoughts with the experience that I've got with everyone. It's an exciting marketplace. We've had a tough time. Inflation's still on the way down, but not as far as it should have dropped. And so swap rates have gone up, interest rates have gone up a little bit with lenders. But I think if we survive till 25, the following 24 months, fingers crossed, no black swans, we should be in a good place to have a really good economy and a good marketplace for all investors and developers across the country.
Brilliant. Lorraine?
I'd say it's really tough at the moment, but there's always the time to buy property is now, even in a downturn, because there's a cycle. So it will go down, but it will come back again. So if you're thinking about it, now is the time. There are good deals to be had out there, but do your numbers. Get that spreadsheet, do your numbers, add some time onto it, and surround yourself with those that know. So if you want to invest up north, but make sure you are connected with people who can help you to see a project through up there, if you haven't got anybody that you're connected with there. Absolutely
fantastic. Great words to end on. Apologies to those with the comments and questions we just haven't have time to get to. You can reach out to us separately and we'll happily answer anything, or come back to you if we need to. So thank you for your time. Hope I know you found that valuable. You could not have not found that valuable for the last hour. So I'm not even going to ask you if you found it valuable. I know you did. Appreciate your time. And until next month, talk to you all soon. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.